And I'm just going to mute all, and you know what to do in case you have a question or a comment. I apologize for the off and on for class. We're on now for the next few weeks. As it gets closer to Thanksgiving, we'll talk about Black Friday, whether we'll have class that day. And then we'll talk about December also, because there'll be a few weeks in December that I'll be in Israel. But anyway, we're here now and the next couple weeks. So we had left off. Good morning. I was just saying about reminding everybody of the schedule and where we left off, which is chapter 14. We're going to start with verse 6. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. I just want to read the first 5 verses of chapter 14, just so that we remember where we're at. So on page 74 in our text. Now it fell upon a day. It's just an interesting way to phrase that. I would have just said one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said unto the young man that bore his armor, "Come and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on yonder side." Right, the Israelite camp is on one side of a riverbed, and the Philistine garrison is on the other side. But he told not his father. So Jonathan didn't let his father know about this plan to infiltrate the Philistines. And Saul tarried in the uttermost part of Giv'ah, under the pomegranate tree, which is in Migron, and the people that were with him were about 600 men. And Achiah, the son of Achituv, Ichabod's brother, the son of Pinchas, the son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. Right, so he has a Kohen with him. So we'll see whether this will now be a trend, that when Israelites go to battle, they have a Kohen with them to kind of bless the battle, or to consult the Urim and Tumim stones to ensure that at least God is in favor of this ensuing battle. So we'll see about that. And just a note about Ichabod, right? So it's from the time of our founding fathers, Ichabod is a known name, but in Hebrew, Ichavod it's not a good name to have. It means without honor or without respect. Kind of an unusual name to name your child, right? When parents see the birth of a baby boy and say, what are we going to name this child? I know, no respect. It's like Rodney Dangerfield. It's ridiculous. How do you name that a child that name? So I don't know. And then, of course, the founding fathers, they might not know what Ichabod means, but they might, because Hebrew was part of the curriculum of Harvard and Yale, right? And the other Ivy League schools at the very beginning. Maybe they knew, but anyway, that's so that I don't have an answer to that question. It's like in the book of Ruth, the 2 sons of right there. We're told about Naomi and her husband having 2 sons, Machlon and Chilion. So it's like disease and pestilence. Again, who names their children those names? Now, for the book of Ruth, it's unclear whether the book of Ruth is actually a historical work, an actual work of nonfiction an actual story that actually took place, and then you can question who has names like Machlon and Chilion. But if it's a work of literary fiction that's supposed to have taken place during that time, then you can understand that names will then have a purpose, and that since they're not real people, then it's not a big deal. Ron.
The prophet Hosea was told to name his kids awful names as well.
That's right. No, and also Hosea, Isaiah, yes, and Hosea is told to marry a prostitute, also for that. So yes, for those positions, but a random Kohen that's listed here, why name Ichavod? Yes, Barbara.
Back earlier, you had Israel. You had back in early years, names were changed.
Yes.
Jacob became Israel.
Right.
Here again, a name because of whatever, his name was changed.
Well, his name isn't changed. We're just introduced to him as Ichavod.
Well, yeah, but at that point we're introduced, he's already had the name change.
But so so I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, Barbara. We know about Pinchas and his sons who were corrupt and corrupted the priesthood outside at the Mishkan in Shiloh, but we don't know. We've never met Ichavod before. This is the first time we're meeting him, so we don't know anything about him. We've heard of Pinchas, we've heard of Eli, but we haven't heard of Achiyah, we haven't heard of Achituv, and we haven't heard of Ichavod. So your theory could be correct, but I'm just pointing out, Barbara, that we've never seen him before, and it's just an unusual name. Now, if we see him again, and maybe there'll be a story about the change of his name, okay, but I'm not sure about that. So, verse 4, and between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a rocky crag on the one side and a rocky crag on the other side, and the name of the one was Botzes, and the name of the other Seneh. The one crag rose up on the north in front of Michmas, and the other on the south in front of Geva. Okay, so this is where we left off. Just the background for Jonathan going to go on a raid into the Philistine garrison. So now, we pick up on page 76, verse 6, and let's see, we'll see how many verses we get to before we look at the commentary. Vayomer Yehonatan el Hana'ar Nosei Chelav, Lecha v'na'abra el matzav ha'arelim ha'ele, ulai ya'aseh Adonai lanu, ki ein la'Adonai matzor lahoshia berav o bima'at. So I'm going to have to use the English a little bit here. Jonathan said to his servant, the armor bearer, let's go and cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. Maybe God will be there for us or do for us. Like God will make our invasion work, because there is no restraint to God to save by many or by few. That, in other words, we don't have to think that we need a lot of people, a lot of soldiers in order to make this work. God will make whatever God wants to work. And it's also interesting that Jonathan is quoted as referring to the Philistines as the uncircumcised. It's like calling black people the N-word. Okay, so I just want to have us understand that it's not just pointing out a physical characteristic as if calling black people, but it's insulting. It's meant to be insulting and offensive. Okay, so I'm just pointing that out. 7, Vayomer lo nosei chelav, aseh kol asher bilvavecha, netei lach, hineni imcha kilvavecha. So his armor bearer said to him, do what's ever in your mind to do. Now it's translated as in your heart, but it's meant in the Bible, lave, which means in modern Hebrew, heart, also meant mind. So do what's ever in your mind to do. Turn, like go and do. I'm with you according to your mind and heart. 8, Vayomer Yehonatan, Hine anachnu ovrim el ha'anashim, v'niglinu aleihem. Jonathan said, we'll pass over, we're going to pass over, go over to the men, and we will be uncovered, revealed unto them. Like, in other words, they're going to see what we're doing. 9, Imko yomru eleinu, domu ad hagienu aleichem, ve'amadnu tachtenu, ve'lo na'aleh aleihem. If they say to us, hold on, domu, which means stand still, right, stop, until we reach you, we will stand in our place and will not go up to them. Ve'im ko yomru alu aleinu ve'alinu ki netanam Adonai biyadenu v'zeh lanu ha'ot. But if they say, come up to us, then we'll go up, because God will have given them into our hands, and this will be the sign. So in other words, he's saying to the armor bearer, let's go and let's see what they say. If they say, stop where you are until we reach you, then that's a sign that we're not going to succeed. But if they say, come up to us, ha ha ha, we're going to get you, that kind of thing, come up to us, then we know that that's a sign that God says this is going to be a success. 11. So let's stop there and see the commentary on these 4 verses. So the bottom left, there is no restraint to the Lord. A fine confessio fidei, of which Gideon's adventure in Judges 7 is the classical embodiment and illustration. It was quoted with effect by another Hebrew paladin, the hero of a later war of independence in the Maccabees. So in other words, Ein la'Adonai matzur. So that phrase, Ein la'Adonai matzur, God has no restraint. Right, so we have a similar use of that in Judges and also in Maccabees. Okay. We will disclose ourselves. They would not become visible to the Philistine sentries until they had passed the northerly of the 2 crags. If they say thus unto us, an omen would be detected in the words, with which they were challenged by the centuries. So it's like we have to see Genesis 24 as another example of like of a signal. And then verse 10, this shall be the sign, namely, that the Lord has delivered them into our hand. Okay, and ancient Israel on this, page 312, we see below the line, these uncircumcised. This designation for the Philistines is, of course, contemptuous. Its spirit is precisely reflected from the other side of the ethnic barrier in Othello's reference to a Turk he killed in battle as a circumcised dog. Okay, so Robert Alter, being the English literature professor that he is, so Shakespeare is his reference. Okay, so it doesn't say these uncircumcised dogs or pigs, so there's no animal to go with it, but just the idea is the uncircumcised ones is not just a factual description, but meant to be a pejorative. Do whatever your heart inclines. Here I am with you, my heart as yours. The translation follows the reading of the Septuagint. The Masoretic text conveys the same general idea, though a bit less coherently. Do whatever is in your heart, incline you, here I am with you as your heart. And verse 10, that will be the sign for us. Readers from the Talmud to our own times have constructed this as a kind of divination. It's far more likely that a further contrast is implied between Saul, who depends on divination, and Jonathan, who is thinking in pragmatic military terms. If they invite us to come up to them, that will be our great opportunity. If they order us to await their descent, we may have no recourse, except perhaps flight at the last moment. Okay, so let's go on. Verse 11, Vayigalu shnehem el matzav plishtim, vayomru plishtim, hine ivrim yotzim min hachorim, asher hitchabu sham. So they revealed themselves at the Philistine garrison, and the Philistines said, here are Hebrews coming out of the holes from which they were hiding. And so that also not like meaning that they look like mice or rats or something like that. It's not also just a description, but rather meant to be understood as a pejorative. Look at these Hebrew mice coming out of their holes. 12, Vaya'anu anshe hamatzava et Yonatan ve'et nosei chelav vayomru alu elenu v'nodia etchem davar vayomer Yonatan el nosei chelav alei acharai kinatanam Adonai biyad Yisrael. And the men of the garrison spoke to Jonathan and to his armor bearer, and they said, come up to us, and we'll show you something, or we'll let you know something. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, because God has given them into the hand of Israel. 13, Vaya'al Yonatan al Yadav va'al Raglav v'nosei chelav acharav Vayiplu lifnei Yonatan v'nosei chelav memotet acharav. So Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer, and his armor bearer slew them after him. So the Hebrew is ambiguous, but the English less so, right? In other words, Jonathan going up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer after him, vayiplu lifnei Yonatan. They fell before Jonathan. So yes, I guess that is a reference to the Philistines falling before him, and they fell before Jonathan. Yeah, but the trope. So it might be better understood. They fell before Jonathan and his armor bearer, but the cantillation marks doesn't point that out. In other words, the cantillation marks is like the punctuation. They fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer slew them after him. So memotate. It's just the memotate. It's not the usual word for slaying. It's usually hika, lehakot, something like that. So memotate, causing death. Cause death after him. Okay, just an unusual use of the Hebrew. Okay, 14. Vatahi hamaka harishona asher hika Yonatan v'nosei kelav ke'esrim ish kevechatzi ma'ana tzemed sadeh. So the first wave of slaying that Jonathan and his armor bearers slayed was like 20 men within like a half of Pharaoh's length in an acre of land. So I don't know how long that is. Certainly the writer of Samuel understands that the reader is a farmer and would understand exactly what kind of length, like what kind of distance that was. How far did Jonathan and his armor bearer go? Like how much did they walk as they were slaying 20 people? So a half a furrow in an acre. I don't know how many feet that is. Is that 50 feet? 100 feet? 100 yards? No, I don't think it's 100 yards. An acre is less than that. But I don't know. But we're supposed to be impressed, I think, that Jonathan, just two guys were able to slay 20 people. That's pretty good. Now you're assuming that the 20 people were armed, and so how can 20 people be surprised? You can imagine one or two could be surprised, but you'd think other people are around. How could Jonathan and his armor bearer be able to slay so many people? But that shows the miracle that God was with them. So 15, Vatahi charada b'machaneh basadeh uv'chol ha'am hamatzav v'hamashchit chardu gam hema v'tirgaz haaretz vatahi lecherdat Elohim. And there was a trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people, I'm assuming the Philistines, and the garrison and the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked, so it grew into a terror from God. So Jonathan and his armor bearer, as they're slaying these 20 men, then caused a great lumbering kind of sound that caused great trembling among the people. So what I'm reminded of is in the book of Kings, the 4 lepers that are outside the city of Shomron that's under siege by the Assyrians. Somehow the 4 lepers who are in between, because they're outside the Israelite camp, but they see the Assyrian army there. As they walk, the Assyrians hear these 4 people walking, as if it's the sound of chariots coming, and it causes the Assyrian army to retreat. All right, so there is that other example that I can think of people walking, and it sounds like there's a greater amount of people and equipment than just those people walking. Okay, so that's what's happening here. 2 people slaying and walking, causing great trembling in the Philistine camp. 16, Vayiru Hatzofim leShaul begivat Binyamin, v'hine hehamon namog vayelech vahalom. So the watchmen, like the scouts of Saul in Givat Benjamin, looked out, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went hither and thither. So they scattered. So the Saul's scouts saw what was happening in the Philistine camp and saw that the Philistine camp was running away in a scattered, fearful way. Okay, so let's stop there and see the commentary on here from verse 11. So on 77, show you a thing. The words are bantering, as in the modern expression, I shall show you a thing or two. They fell before Jonathan. Jonathan struck them down in hand-to-hand fighting, and his armor-bearer, who carried his sword, dispatched them. Okay, so that, we don't know that. So, because his armor-bearer, I just think of like a golfer and his caddy. So now the golfer could have a club in his hand while the caddy has the rest of the clubs. So the armor bearer, like Jonathan could have asked the armor bearer, give me the dagger and or give me the sword, and the armor bearer has the rest of the stuff. And I don't know what the rest of the stuff is, but the armor bearer has it around his shoulders and around his waist, the other weapons. So I would imagine Jonathan would have one weapon in his hand while the armor bearer had others. Because I can't imagine Jonathan, well, but it could be a miracle that Jonathan is just doing hand-to-hand combat, but I just can't imagine that that would be the case. But that's what the commentary says here. I'm just suggesting that there's another plausible way to envision what the words are describing. Okay, 14, half a furrow's length and an acre of land. Literally in a yoke of land. That is, the area which a yoke of oxen could plow in one day, roughly an acre. The furrow's length of a yoke would then denote the length of one side of such a square measure. The point is that although the outpost was cut to pieces in a very small area, and the Philistines were close to one another, they could not withstand Jonathan's assault. 15, in the camp in the field, the sudden attack spreads panic among the Philistines. 4 bodies of men are enumerated. The main army of the Philistines camped in the open country, all the people, which perhaps denotes the camp followers, the garrison of the outpost attacked by Jonathan, and the spoilers, that is, the raiding parties of chapter 13, verse 17. So that's helpful to understand what this encampment entailed. And the earthquake, Kimchi, the medieval Bible commentator, understands the phrase figuratively as describing the tumult and confusion of the Philistines. Most modern commentators, however, take the words literally of an earthquake, which was the cause of the widespread panic. All right, so it could be, well, whatever it is, it's meant to be understood as a miracle that though Jonathan and his armor bearer could have attacked the exact moment that an earthquake was happening, and this is the Syrian African Rift Valley, which is prone to earthquakes. It is a fault line, so it could have been, but the miracle is that the attack happened just when this earthquake happened, or the effect of the attack felt like an earthquake. Okay, a terror from God, a panic sent by God. Ralbag and Mutsudat David, also other medieval commentators, prefer the sense a very great panic. See mighty mountains or mighty cedars. Okay, and then 16, Givat Benjamin, the district and not the town of Giv'ah, melted away, better was surging. The remarkable thing was a mob moving purposelessly to and fro in its mad impulse. Okay, let's see what Alter says about these verses. So we're on the bottom of 312, verse 11. Look, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they've been hiding. These words accord perfectly with the report in chapter 13 of the Israelites hiding in every nook and cranny, and also vividly express the contempt of the Philistines for the Hebrews, whom they depict as so many vermin. The contempt is extended in the taunting challenge to Jonathan and his lad in the next verse. On 3:13, Jonathan climbed up on his hands and knees. Although it's not easy to reconstruct the exact tactic of surprise, this notation makes clear that instead of walking up the slope directly to the Philistine outpost, Jonathan and his armor bearer managed to slip off to one side and make their way up the slope by a circuitous route, crouching and crawling in order to take shelter among the rocks and thus come upon the outpost undetected. So I would argue it's kind of hard to climb up a mountain bearing arms, which are metal. They would be clanging. It'd be kind of hard to keep them apart in that way. I have to take this phone call. I'll be right back. Hello? Right. No, I appreciate the reaching out. We had an essay on Tuesday to do an assessment. We're still trying to figure out something for them to use in the shower. We'll see how that goes. Maybe very well in the next week or two, again, to start us. But we're not putting how about if I reach out to you? Okay, I'm sorry about that. It was a call related to my parents, and I just had to take that, and I apologize for that. So anyway, what I was saying is that when you're climbing up a mountain with metal equipment, it's very hard to keep it silent. Now, it's possible that each sword or dagger might have been inside a case, but I can't imagine that that would be the case, because that just makes it that much more cumbersome to carry around. So somehow they were able to climb up the mountain stealthily without the Philistines noticing. Okay. 14, the first toll of dead. The literal meaning of the Hebrew is the first blow. With arrows and rocks of the field, the translation adopts the reading of the Septuagint. The Masoretic text has here within about half a furrow long an acre of field. But that sequence of Hebrew words looks scrambled. So it's just interesting that somehow the Septuagint had Hebrew that would meant something else. Just a second. So, Bachatzi Ma'anat Semed Sadeh. With arrows and... Okay, so Chatzi I can understand. Somehow you can, if you add a mem, a final mem to Chatzi, that word Chatzi in verse 14, if you put a final mem there, you could make the vowels say Bechitzim, and a chetz is an arrow or a spear. The other rocks of the field, that I don't know how to get from Tzemed Sadeh to somehow rocks of the field. I'm not sure, so I'd have to look that up. But Tzemed here is translated as a furrow, no, in an acre of land. So I'm not sure what the Hebrew was that the Greek translation made into rocks. But I could figure out the chatzi coming to be the arrows. Okay, so that does make more sense in terms of describing what they were using in order to kill the 20 people. 15, terror shook. The Hebrew charada means both terror and shaking, like the ultra-Orthodox are called charedim in Hebrew, the tremblers, because of going back and forth like this when they daven, okay? So that's why they're called charedi. Dire terror, the Hebrew is literally terror of God, but the latter word, Elohim, serves as an intensifier. In any case, the idiom functions as a kind of pun. Dire terror is terror caused by God. And 16, going off yonder, the translation presupposes halom, yonder, a repeated word in this episode, instead of the Masoretic vahalom, which could mean either asyntactically and yonder, or and hitting. That is, the Philistines were going on hitting each other. Okay, so let's continue here in the Hebrew. Let's do 17 through 23. Vayomer Shaul la'am asher ito, pikduna ura'u, mi halach me'imanu, vayifkedu, vehine ein Yonatan venosei chelav. So Saul said to the people that were with him, remember they had 600 men with him, take an accounting and look to see who went from among us. And they took the accounting, and they saw that Jonathan and his armor bearer weren't there. 18, Vayomer Shaul le'Achiyah, Hagisha Aron ha'Elohim, ki haya Aron ha'Elohim bayom hahu uvenei Yisrael. And Saul said to Achiyah, bring forward the ark of God, because the ark of God in that time was there with the children of Israel. 19, Vayehi ad diber Shaul el haKohen, vehehamon asher b'machaneh plishtim, vayelech haloch varav, vayomer Shaul el haKohen esof yadecha. So, while Saul was speaking to the Kohen, that the tumult that was in the camp of the Philistines went on and increased greatly. And then there's an asterisk there to show that there's a pause in the middle of the verse. And Saul said unto the Kohen, withdraw your hand. So now, withdraw his hand, I guess, from having brought the ark of God forward. That's what I'm assuming, because that's the direction that Saul gave to Achiyah, the Kohen, right? And then we were just interrupted by this description of how the Philistine noise was getting greater. 20, Vayizaek Shaul v'chol ha'am asher ito, Vayava'u ad hamilchama, vehine hayata cherev ish bere'ehu mehuma gedola me'od. So the Saul and the people were with him, were gathered together, and they came to the battle, and every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was great mehuma, discomfiture. There was a great mess. 21, V'ha'ivrim hayu la plishtim ke'etmol shilshom asher alu imam b'machaneh saviv v'gam hema lihiyot im Yisrael asher im Shaul v'Yonatan. So I'm going to look at the English translation for this. Now the Hebrews that were with the Philistines as before time, and that went up with them into the camp round about, even they also turned to be with the Israelites that were with Saul and Jonathan. So there were some Israelites where the Philistines were who had given themselves up because they didn't see any other option to save themselves. I think that was a reference to that from a couple weeks ago, earlier on. So those Israelites then came out and came over to Saul's side because they saw that the Philistines were under attack and losing. 22, V'chol ish Yisrael hamit chabim bahar Ephraim shamu ki nasu plishtim vayidbeku gam hema acharehem b'milchama. And all the Israelite men who were hiding in the hills of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were retreating, and they also cleaved or attached themselves after them to those Israelites in war. Vayosha Adonai bayomahu et Yisrael v'hamilchama avra et Beit Aven. So God saved Israel on that day, and the battle passed on as far as Beit Aven. Okay, so this is a very long chapter. I'm just looking to see the end. The chapter has 52 verses. Okay, so we're almost halfway through the chapter, but let's look at the commentary on these sentences, 17 through 23, bottom of 78. Bring hither the ark of God, a difficult phrase. It was not the ark which was normally used for inquiring of God, but the Urim and Tumim which were kept in the breastplate of the ephod. There is no mention anywhere else of the transportation of the ark from Kiryat Yearim until its removal by David. And if consultation were to be made of or before the ark, it would have been more in keeping with the great reverence in which the ark was held by the Israelites if Saul had gone to it for consultation rather than ask that it should be brought to him. Okay, so the commentary is suggesting we should not understand Aron HaElohim literally as the holy ark, but rather a cabinet or a chest that had the Urim and Tumim in it. And that cabinet or chest could also be called an Aron. Okay, so maybe, but we'll see. But I understand the commentary's difficulty here, that rather the ark is never transported in this way for service like this. The ark is permanent, and people go to it. So it's just unusual that Saul is doing this. So for the commentary, it must mean some other kind of ark. Rashi comments simply the ark of God, that is the Urim and Tumim, suggesting that he appreciated the difficulty and held that Saul meant the Urim and Tumim. And Kimchi remarks the ephod and the Urim and Tumim, which were with the ark, are intended. The Septuagint has the reading, bring hither the ephod, for he carried the ephod that day before Israel. So the Septuagint had a Hebrew version that said ephod instead of Aaron. So, okay. Withdraw your hand. Before Saul had even asked the question of the oracle, he sees the need for immediate action. Bottom of 79, the state of the Philistine camp indicated plainly enough the will of God. Discomfiture and the panic and confusion, the Philistines mistake friend for foe and fight each other. The Hebrews forced levies of Israelites from the districts occupied by the Philistines, had hid themselves. See the Philistine taunt in verse 11. Beit Aven, west of Michmas. See chapter 13. The Philistine withdrawal is naturally westward to their own land. Okay, so alter on these phrases. Yeah, on the bottom of 314, bring forth the ephod. The Masoretic text, both in this clause and the next, has Ark of God instead of ephod. But the reading of the Septuagint, ephod, is compelling on several grounds. We have been informed earlier that the Ark of God was left, not to be moved for the foreseeable future, at Kiryat Yearim. The ark was not an instrument of divination like the ephod, and what Saul wants Achiah to do here is to divine. It's possible that Achiah's lineal connection with the keepers of the ark at Shiloh led some early transmitter of the text to align this episode with the earlier story in which the ark, quite misguidedly, was brought out from Shiloh to the battlefield. The Masoretic text also reads asyntactically, for the ark of God on that day was, and the Israelites, whereas the Septuagint far more coherently has, for on that day he was bearing the ephod before the Israelites. Pull back your hand, that is, desist from the act of divination you have begun. It's no longer necessary, for the auditory evidence of the Philistine rout has reached our ears. And look, every man's sword was against his fellow. This spectacle of total self-mutilating panic in the camp of the enemy is a recurrent motif that goes back to Judges. Compare the effect of Gideon's surprise attack on the Midianite camp, and as a kind of narrative realization of God's direct intervention in battle to grant victory to Israel. The foundational instance of this motif is the victory at the Sea of Reeds in Exodus. And Hebrews who were previously with the Philistines, given the subject status of the Israelites, it's not surprising that some of them would have been conscripted by the Philistines, either as soldiers or to perform menial tasks for the troops. They are referred to here as Hebrews because that is how their Philistine masters would have referred to them. Okay. So it's 10:20. So why don't we stop here for today, and we'll continue the description, the narrative of this battle next time. So have a good rest of the day, and Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Take care.